Thank you, Dr. Raghupati, and a very good morning to all of you. ITC has been doing a lot of work in the area of water, both within the fence and outside, including some of the green building initiatives that Mr. Raghupati was talking about. But today I will be restricting myself to water in the context of agriculture and the work that we've been doing, and the learnings actually from our 2 decades of work in water and agriculture. And I'm concentrating on this because water is agriculture is an extremely important supply chain for many of our businesses, not only because we have some of the largest agri-businesses, but many of our consumer-facing products are critically dependent on sustainable and competitive supply of agri-commodities and agri-products. So agriculture is a very, very critical sector for ITC as a business as a whole. So before I come to ITC's experience, let me just share a few statistics which actually made us concerned and look at water in agriculture. I'm sure all of you know that despite the kind of investments that were made in the initial 5-year plans, rain-fed agriculture still dominates. 62% of total agriculture in India is still rain-fed. And so as far as the farmers are concerned, farming is a gamble on monsoons, which was always unpredictable to begin with, and over the year on year, it's becoming more and more erratic, as we have all experienced. Even more alarming, and that's something that Mr. Raghupati mentioned, and I think Mr. Kant also yesterday laid a lot of emphasis on it. One of the most alarming trends that we have seen is that of the 38% irrigated agriculture that we have, 65% of irrigation comes from groundwater. And this has seen, it has in the past 50 years, it has risen from about 18% to 66%. And this is on the back of an explosion of deep tube wells. So in effect, what is happening is that most of irrigated agriculture today is being fed by tube well irrigation. And why this is extremely alarming is its impact on groundwater. And if you people have, any of you have seen some of the studies that have been done by the Central Groundwater Board on the groundwater blocks, as per the last study, which was 5 or 6 years ago, 30% of the groundwater blocks are either semi-critical, critical, or overexploited. In fact, 15% are overexploited, and this number is increasing day by day because our rate of groundwater exploitation is completely unsustainable today. In short, what is happening is that the farmer, most of Indian agriculture, and that is dependent on the monsoon, it's rain-fed, and this is where most of our pulses and oilseeds are grown, apart from major crops, of course. And exacerbating this trend is the fact that farmers cannot depend on groundwater anymore. And in fact, small farmers cannot, because it's actually a competition, to hit to the bottom, because you need to spend huge amounts of money now to tap into groundwater, which small farmers cannot. And 85% of Indian farmers today are around 1 hectare holding. So this, in short, was what caused us great concern in ITC, because, as I said, agriculture value chains are extremely important for us, and therefore nearly 2 decades ago we put in place a water stewardship program in a very serious manner. And it was, to begin with, it was a comprehensive integrated watershed development program, all of you are familiar with. And in the past, as I said, since we started today, we have over 500,000 acres under watershed development, which is, by a single corporate entity, it is a fairly large number. There are about 8,500 water harvesting structures that have been revived, which have a total net storage capacity of more than 28 million kiloliters. So in that sense, the initiative is fairly large and over a longer period and extended over various geographies to draw some strong lessons. And not to mention that this entire work has been done on the back of creating very strong institutions, because without that, sustainability in water is not possible unless they own water. The community owns water. This is not possible. So at the heart of all our initiatives is the creation of very strong grassroots institutions that plan, manage, execute, implement, and maintain whatever work that has been done in watershed. This also includes a very high percentage of direct financial contribution towards work, because we feel that is one of the most important indicators both of how they feel, how strongly they feel about water, and also the kind of ownership that they generate because they have contributed to it. So that, in a nutshell, is what we have done. Now, learnings. In fact, I was one of the first thing that I was going to mention is that for anyone getting into this field, one of the most cost-effective and rapid impact that you can have is by, in fact, reviving the traditional water bodies that India has across our geography. And that is what Mr. Raghupathi had mentioned right in the beginning. These are traditional structures. They have fallen into disuse. And in all our project areas, you'll always find such structures which need to be revived. With community, of course, otherwise they'll fall into disuse again. So I really personally feel that instead of creating new structures, this is one of the most cost-effective ways to have a large-scale impact. Of course, you can't just concentrate on the water bodies. You have to adopt the watershed approach so that you do the catchment treatment in order to ensure that these tanks and check dams or other kinds of structures do not again get silted up. So with tank at the center, I think a comprehensive watershed program is one of the key things that we have learned. However, just when you plan for groundwater, watershed, it is basically planning for surface hydrology. And what we have realized is that given the dramatic exploitation of groundwater and the kind of exploitation that has happened, something very urgent and very targeted and focused is required to recharge aquifers in your region. And for this, a good watershed plan needs to be coupled with what is called managed aquifer recharge. And that is not possible without doing scientific geohydrological studies to identify the lineament areas, because that then are have the greatest potential for recharge of the aquifers in that region. So that's lesson number 2. But so the two, watershed plus geohydrology, that I've been talking about is really supply side augmentation. But that is clearly not enough. It's not only enough, actually, we'll do more harm if we do not couple this supply side augmentation with demand side management. Because then what you're doing is you're making, there is water available and it can lead to misuse and profligate use, actually. And then you are back to square one. Because then again, you have to rethink of strategies to augment water and water resources. So therefore, this is where grassroots institutions play a very, very important role, because this is where you can really do demand-side management through, once again, a very scientific study of water balancing in that area, and along with the community working out a water budgeting plan. So that's lesson number 3. And finally, the magnitude of the challenge is so huge that going it alone may seem heroic, but a bit pointless and futile. I think the need of the hour really is multi-stakeholder partnerships, which at ITC we are committed to and we have always been doing. Mr. Raghupathi and I were the first movers in Rajasthan. In fact, one of the earliest PPPs in watershed in Bhilwara district, if you remember. And from then on, it has really grown. We are partner with 5 or 6 state governments today on this. But anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that a multi-stakeholder partnership is very, very critical to meet this huge challenge. And when I say multi-stakeholder partnerships, I basically have 4 kinds of players in mind. One is, of course, the government, because that's where the scale comes from. They have the schemes, they have the programs. And one of the most important things that corporates can do actually is to help government implement these programs efficiently, both in terms of financial and project management. The second player, and that is how we have been doing it, the second player, very critical player are the NGOs, and we partner with NGOs in all our work, because they not only bring expertise and domain knowledge in the area of water and, in fact, both surface and underground hydrology, but they also have mobilization skills that the other sectors, like at least us, we do not have, and that is very critical for demand management. The third player that I have in mind are research organizations, close to your project areas, international ones, national ones, because that is where cutting edge knowledge, the latest things that have been tried and happened, that is how you get it. And so therefore you are constantly value adding to your project and not stuck in some kind of a stagnant situation. And finally, of course, I think the corporate sector also has a very, very important role to play in the development of water resources, because we have the project and financial management skills. So together, I think it is it's a winning combination, and that is where actually I've ended. That's the last point that I wanted to make. Thank you very much.